See, this is a problem. The way he's dealing with the MH17 here. He is correctly looking at the data the U.S. is providing and being very, very skeptical of it, and suggesting it's unreliable and everything else, and I'm with him on all that. That's the correct way to look at it. But then he looks at the Russian data and he completely uncritically accepts the radar and everything they're saying. It's inconsistent. To be extremely critical of the evidence the Americans are providing and be essentially uncritical. Um, I have yet. The truth is, I have yet to see James Corbett say anything at all critical about any information provided by any Russian source. I'm sure if you have a counterexample, great. Maybe the world would like to see it. I'm sure one exists, but I've yet to see it. And this is just another example of it. And I'll be honest, this is actually a trap that I've fallen into myself, because the Russians seem um, to be a little bit more um, uh, in line with following international law and everything else. To me, that facade broke with the um, with the Crimea seizure, not because they seized Crimea, but because they said they weren't, and they did, and that was to me a credibility issue, and to me that's when that broke. Not that I was ever as uncritical as he is, but I mean I was certainly willing to suggest or willing to accept that perhaps the Russian sources were, a little bit better. They're not. They're not in any way. So, when the Russians, they present the satellite data, you need to ask the same questions. Where did the satellite data come from? Can you prove it? Can you demonstrate your claims and all these sorts of things, which he doesn't do. He never does. He's properly critical with the American information. He asks all the right questions and everything else, but then when the Russian stuff comes up, it's just like total free pass, right? And I think that it's the reason why so much of this stuff comes up so warped. Not just him, but in general. It does end up as Russian propaganda, even if it's not intended to be, because you're accepting the Russian propaganda. The truth is that you need to take the Russian stuff as skeptically as the American stuff. Where did this? We have no way to corroborate that the radar is what the radar says, or anything the Russians are saying at all about the Ukrainian military or anything like this, right? All we can do is point out that there's differing stories. Um, try to find. It makes more sense to try to find consistencies across both of them than it does to try to find inconsistencies, um, and just point out that it's all nonsense both ways. Um, you're really not getting anywhere by doing this. But I mean, this was one of the more egregious examples that I've heard. He was really, really, really brutal on the American stuff, and he should have been because it was brutal, and it had to come down on, or be come down on like that. But there was no scrutiny at all on the Russian stuff, and it's really quite unfortunate.